After my parents got divorced, my father actually got custody of my brother and I. A few years back, I had some conversations with my mother, and I asked her, why did that happen? And I guess my father sort of, he was very insistent that he was going to raise us and not my mother. And I guess there was a lot of, fear. He was, abusive towards my mother. And so he used a lot of fear tactics to get her to not fight for us, I guess, in court. So one incidence of physical abuse that I do remember, I remember hearing them arguing one time, and they were like locked in their bedroom arguing, and me and my brother were outside, and we could hear them yelling. And my brother, he's younger than me, he was crying, and he was like, oh, he was like, they're gonna get a divorce. And oh my God, at the time I remember I was like, that's a good thing. I was like, they should get a divorce. I was like 10 or younger or something. But I just remember hearing them arguing, and then I remember when the door opened, they came out and they both had blood on them. That was like the first time she ever hit him back. It hurts you in a sense that, that's your mother, that's your father, and so you love them. And so to hear somebody talking, it's like you get angry when your friends crack a joke about your mom or whatever. So what do you do when your father does that? You're kind of stuck because that's your father, and that's, and you don't want to say something to him. But, and I think it's sort of like, okay, well, he's insulting my mother, but she's my mother. So in a way, he's almost insulting me too, because then you start thinking about, well, do I do that? Do I act in these ways? And so I think that's probably the biggest way in which it affected me. One particular relationship I was in that started when I was a senior in high school and then went on into my first couple years of college. We broke up at one point, and even after we broke up, it sort of wasn't a clean breakup, and I wasn't completely over her type of thing. And for a while I was doing things like I was yelling at her. I called her all kinds of names. I was like insulting her to her friends. I remember at one point, like I would like walk past her room and I was yelling out, all sorts of insults so that everybody could hear. And, it reached a point where, I started to get depressed and that kind of stuff. But it was really it was at that point that I sort of realized, and as I started to sort of deal with, I guess, my anger and my hurt in that situation, I really was also upset at myself for acting in that way, and it was like, that was when I sort of started to think, that's something my father would do. Like, I wish I had, had an opportunity to sort of, I guess, grow to love him as my father, as opposed to growing up fearing him. We had one conversation where we talked about, I think we sort of started to approach the topic of the fact that he was abusive towards my mother. And he pretty much, he had excuses and justifications for his behavior. And the place where we left it was that we need to have more conversation about it. I don't want to be somebody that my children fear. I want them to look forward to me coming home as opposed to being afraid when I come home. I want them to want to do things with me, and I also would like to exhibit. I would want them to see a positive, healthy relationship between me and their mother.
You don't want your kid to be afraid of you, because when I was younger, I was definitely afraid of my father.
I wanted the relationship with the man that I married. I wanted the relationship that we had for 5 years before he started being violent.
My dad spent most of his time during the week out of town, and so it really wasn't something to look forward to. To have Dad coming home for the weekend, the belt was always hanging on the bathroom doorknob, and so I always knew, what I was in for at the end of the week. And I kind of see the reason that I was so free in being abusive with the family was I kind of saw that as a continuation of my own childhood. What I used to do is I'd grab Nancy by her arms, and I'd be nose to nose with her and just screaming what I thought should be done right into her face. And so she always had black and blue marks on the back of her arm, and it never dawned on me for a long, long time that I had put them there, and that was just my anger. The kids, I used to hit the kids.
He was really quick to throw the hammer down, and especially me and my oldest brother. We definitely got the brunt of a lot of, of the physical stuff.
Like, it would start, him and my mom would fight, and he'd start getting, saying really mean shit to my mom, and so we'd get into it, too, and tell him to shut up and, get the hell out of here, and stop being such an asshole and everything, but then it would just, like a belt would come out or something would happen, and he'd lose it,
Yeah.
It was hard to see the boys being afraid of him and also being very angry with him at the same time, and not knowing what to do with that because he wasn't at any spot where anyone could approach him about his anger.
I was controlling, domineering, overbearing with my wife and my kids for many, many years. The reason I began to pursue change was that Nancy kept prodding me to do that. And what she was doing at that point was planting the seeds for me to see for myself that things weren't going very well, and it was up to me to go out and to make the changes that were necessary.
I was very tired of it, and it seemed like a waste of time, waste of energy, and I didn't want to participate in that anymore.
The depression was years of my abuse that had kind of just beaten her down to the point where she didn't feel like she could function anymore, and she actually wasn't getting out of bed for a while. And then me just getting angrier about that, So it's just a compounding situation here where, I effectively reduced her to rubble, and now I'm angry because of it, So it was all myself. It was all my own actions that got us to this point.
He seemed to be reluctant really to give up his anger, but on the other hand, I think he thought somewhere in there that, maybe this isn't working for me. And so he did go and see Stephen.
I first met Scott Gerard when he came in to the Men Overcoming Violence program for an intake interview. And it was a very powerful experience to sit with him while we had this interview, because I watched him open up in a way that it was clear he had never opened up before about what was going on in his relationship, and also what was going on inside himself.
When I was in group, it was week 16, and as strange as it seems, it's another man who decided to take the same route that I did. He was an ex-basketball player, and he was sitting across the room from me, and he leaned over, and he just leaned over in his seat and put him nose to nose with me, and he said to me, "I've been listening to the same shit come out of your mouth for 16 weeks. I think it's time you decided you were either going to make some changes or stop wasting all of our time." And it was really at that point that I began to, I think, take the work seriously.
After a while, I got a job, and my job was working during the dinner hour, and Scott's job at that time was working from 5 a.m. till 1 p.m. And so he was here as I was leaving for work. And so he had to take on the task of preparing dinner.
So it took a few years, but the kids all came around to expecting that there was going to be dinner every night, and there was dinner every night. It was relatively good, and so that became kind of a comfort rather than a threat. I became a comfort to them in the household.
I think that by our son seeing him prepare dinner, be here, and be open to them, because after a while they did become pretty angry with him and would, want to confront him, and did confront him, and realized that he wasn't going to be angry back at them, that they were able to put a lot of that to rest, I think.
I have no desire to return to any of that behavior. I understand how it didn't ever serve me. Everyone is working on their own issues. My wife is relatively happy with the way things have turned out. I'm certainly happy, and I have peace in my life every day.
I do remember that day. It was a nice day. Everyone, just my mother's cleaning the house. A regular day. My father comes home. I don't think he was home that night because he came home drunk, and a big argument started. My father and my brother got into it real bad. My mother screaming, and knives were drawn, I just remember being real scared. I've always thought the reason I am the way I am, I try to base my life opposite of what I think my father was.
Moni's a great father because he's patient with the kids. He shows love to the kids. He loved the kids. He showed love to me, which I think is very important because the kids need to see love in a marriage.
I don't like to bully. I don't try to intimidate. I've never, ever, ever laid a hand on my wife. And I strongly think it's wrong.
When somebody like Moni makes a decision and is successful in renouncing the violence in their life, something that they could have inherited from their own dad, something that they saw exercised in their family when they were growing up, when you're successful walking away from that, it's because you set up some other, practices instead of that. Moni's worked really hard to get a job that he loves, going to school for that, working really hard. He's got the support of his, longtime partner. So he's got that kind of support. He's got a history of somebody who's able to help him through these things. He makes time for his relationship with her, makes time with his kids. They can do things together as a family. And, and he makes time for, for other friendships with men that will support him in doing this, both in the firehouse, at work, and away from work. So I think it's important for men who want to do this, who want to fill up the vacuum of good practices, to think about what can they do instead of that. What kind of dreams do they have? What kind of visions do they have for the kind of life that they want to lead? Things that are different than what they saw their father do, and really make a concerted effort to go out and do that.
Guys in the firehouse say, I won't do dishes, I don't clean. I clean, I do dishes, I don't mind that, you know what I mean? I don't get to do what I want anymore, you know what I mean? Because maybe my wife wants to go out, and I want to go out with the boys. It just doesn't work out anymore. Everything I do, every decision I make has to concern the well-being of my family now. Having my kids, it's not babysitting, you know what I mean? You got your kids, you can't say, I'm babysitting today. No, it's your kids. You don't babysit your kids.
Just do like this.
You pinched him?
Don't do it.
I pinched him.
Don't do it.
I believe you need discipline in the house. I mean, not necessarily spanking or nothing like that, but someone's got to be the tough person there. I mean, and I hate it because I don't like being the tough person. I want to let them do what they want to do, but I can't. I love my kids acting like they need me, Dad, help me with these clothes. Dad. Sometimes I don't want to deal with it, but, I feel needed. I feel there's a purpose for me here now, I want them to remember that I was there and I did what I did to get them where they are today.